Welcome to EQTV, the Emotional Fitness Channel. And today I've got a real great surprise for you. I've got a colleague of mine, client colleague, called Garth. And this is a man, a beautiful soul, who came out after being married for 20 odd years, 2 teenage children, came out at 50. Welcome to the show, Garth.
Thanks, Marianne. Good to be here.
Yes. Now, we were just having a bit of a free-flow conversation before we came on, and I said, why do you think we're all so afraid of being authentic or showing our true self? What's going on, do you think, for us?
And I think that's the $1 million question, Marianne, because honestly, I ask myself that all the time. Being a gay man and being able to look back in hindsight and say, you know what, I knew all the time, but I was concerned about, making the right choices, being a people pleaser, being who you thought I needed to be. And I don't know how to answer that.
That's seeking approval and that programming.
Yeah.
It can really do our heads in. So what do you think as a human being that are we really seeking validation to know that we're enough? I mean, I've studied the human condition all my life, and I look at the past pieces and the childhood trauma that we all share of needing mum and dad to say you're enough and all of these things, and it can be the cause of our hiding our talents, gifts and sexuality, or lining up energetically with ourselves. So, what sort of hurdle? You came out in the last 12 months, you're in love, your life looks $1 million. And what sort of inward space did you have to line up with to say, I can't do this anymore, I need to be true to myself?
Yeah, it had to be. Look, I mean, we've done work with meditation and mindfulness. So that was absolutely the birthplace of really, the more I did it, the better I got at it, the deeper I went. And therefore my authentic, real self had no place to go but to bubble to the surface. So that was definitely part of the journey. And then from there, it's really just been that idea that there is no other option for me. And it feels just incredibly normal, despite the fact that I thought that this was going to be this big deal and I was maybe going to be someone different, wasn't who I was. Rubbish. I'm totally the most normal and authentic version of me.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you just feel so free, you're always so serious before. And now you can sort of be yourself. And I guess that's difficult for the situation you had to go through with, telling your teenage children and you're breaking up your marriage. How did you cope with sort of that sort of guilt and feeling bad for what you'd created? You win, and do they win? Do they lose? What's the game there?
Yeah, look, and I think that's it. Guilt was a big part of it. And coming out at 50, I definitely was, why now? And this is not supposed to happen. I'm married, I've got kids, but as I did the work, and I did a lot of work in order to just get comfortable with it. Then as I went through that and I accepted this was it, and this was the most authentic version of me, this is who I needed to be, and went through those motions, a lot of tough conversations, a lot of tears, but at the end of the day, they, and my kids in particular I'm talking about, they get the most authentic version of me. They get a totally different dad right now. They get a dad that can just handle stuff, whereas before, as you said, like super uptight, everything had to be right, everything had to be, all lined up in it. It's not me anymore. I'm much more free-flowing. I'm much more so they get a different version of me as well.
Yeah, they get the true version, which is great. I remember we had a Zoom session and I use a lot of powerful tools, and one of the tools we used together was something they have used with the US vets actually for post-traumatic stress disorder, and that is EFT tapping. And when we did a tapping round, it was really about you hadn't told your children, you wanted to energetically line up with it. And I wanted to share what happens for us in our body and brain around that mindfulness stuff. When you do a practice like that, your nervous system is the cause of where you hold our fears, our beliefs, it tells the amygdala in the brain whether we want to run away and hide or what are we going to do. And so once we do a tapping round like that, no matter what the issue, it tells the brain, I'm safe now, I can take a risk. And I just wish that everybody just did the inner work, because that's going to really help people, whether they're addicted to drugs, whether they're wanting to come out, whether they're struggling with money, whatever their thing is. We've got so many unconscious beliefs and programming from when we were little that's causing this trauma.
Yeah.
And so what beliefs did you, did you grow up in a staunch Australian family, where, what bullying's like all over the world, but were you afraid to be yourself because that would mean that you were going to be put down?
Yeah. Yeah, look, and I think that's it. So I think if I look at all of that, it was probably a reasonably normal Australian upbringing. Both parents are devout Catholics. And so, being homosexual was a choice to Catholics, which is total rubbish. But so there was that. My dad was a first grade rugby league player, so very much a blokey's bloke. And I had sort of played, I wouldn't say I came out to my mum a couple of times as sort of 19, 20-year-old, and, it was pretty much shut down. Like, that's not happening. We're not doing gay at all. And so I think I got that message loud and clear that was not who I was going to be. So I think that's right. That was really driving the bus for me. And then when we did that work, I remember the tapping work, not long after that, it was maybe a week or two, then I sat my kids down and I told them. And
Wonderful.
I remember the feeling of that, just being calm, despite the fact that it was a really scary conversation, just being okay to sit in that and to have that conversation.
I think it's really valuable that people, when we talk about mindfulness, it's really been increasing our self-awareness to, well, hang on a minute, this is my life. Yeah. And if my destination is here, this is what I want to experience in life, and I'm allowing fear to block me, what would happen? What would it be like if I let go of that story?
Yeah.
Who could I be if I let go of that story? That, I just see the relief and the freedom and the testimonials and the emails that I get constantly from people that are life-changing stuff once their nervous system lines up with their brain.
That's
and
it.
They go, okay, we've unpacked that. I've got a fear of this. It's not acceptable. I'm a Catholic young boy. I'm not allowed to be myself, and all this programming, because we know it means something. There's a consequence. We've been programmed with this consequence that, well, that means I'm not enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if we look at this extreme example, Garth, that I wanted to mention, and I wanted your advice here about for other men that are struggling in this space, because we know that shame takes people out.
Yeah.
And and we've got such a high suicide rate on the planet, such a high mental health issue, and I believe it's all emotional health issue.
Yeah.
So if we know how to manage our emotional space, and we're coming home to ourselves, and we're meditating, and we're feeling empowered in our skin, then we're going to take more risk, and we're going to feel safe, and we're not going to seek validation from out there.
Yeah, self-soothe.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what advice would you give somebody who's just like you were?
Yeah, mate, I've got to say that I think it is about doing the work. And I think that for me was the path, and that was the journey. And the more I did it, the more that I aligned, and then realized I don't really have a choice. This is who I am, and this is okay. And that self-soothing piece was that I'm enough, and actively working that to then be confident enough to say, okay, I've now got to take a step in this direction, despite all the conditioning and stuff that was loaded onto me as a young person, that this wasn't okay.